This is a Celebration 125 podcast.
Your experience is quite different from what some other people experienced during that time.
Now, the 1948 flood, actually, let me think here, when the scare of the Fraser flood came, my dad was in town, and he said to my brother Doug, ride your bike, be in town, and Doug had to sort of hang around in town, and Dad said, I'll tell you when you go home and tell everyone else to move the cattle. And we didn't have a lot of cattle. I guess we probably had at that time, we had 8 or 10 cows. Because it varied, with how many cattle we did have.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, Doug was to stay in town, and then when Dad gave the word he was to come home, which he did, all of a sudden we saw my brother just riding his bike so fast, screaming. Dad says to move to the hill, and we had to move to the mountain. Our old house was still on the mountain, just a shell of a house. And so we started packing up anything we could. The boys were getting the cows and the chickens, anything they could, and we tried to put our furniture up, so it would be protected. So we went and we stayed 2 nights, I think it was, in the old house. And there was some of our neighbors came up on the hill there too. And then after 2 nights, took us from the mountain. Actually, we must have walked around to the cemetery side.
Now, Pat, one moment. When you say they took us, who is they?
Now, this was, I think it was a Tootens, Mr. Tootens, and a couple of men. Anyways, they came in a small, little, I think there were power boats. I was 11 years old at the time, and everything was so confusing and upsetting for us, but I think it was a power boat. They put us in this power boat, and actually I think they had a few drinks before they came, because they were singing, and the boat was rocking a bit. And I can remember we kind of got stuck in one place on just going over a fence, and that's how high the water was, up just over the fence posts. And so they took us into town, and they took us to the IOF Hall in Agassiz, and that IOF Hall was across from where we used to call, it was a Burgess Feed store. And they took us there, they gave us soup, and then we were taken in an army truck up to Harrison Hot Springs, and we were put on a boat, and we were taken down to Harrison Mills, and that's where we met the train, and they put us on the train. The train was absolutely full of flood refugees. My aunt and friends and babies crying, and we had never, our family, we had never been to Vancouver, so we had no idea. My mom wasn't with us, or my dad, and Mom had to stay because the youngest, my sister Thelma, was just about 2-3 months old, and she was quite sick, so she had to go and stay at the Limbert house on the mountain. So we were anyways on the train, And when my aunt was great for trying to keep up the morale. That was my aunt Weaven. So she was trying to get people, everyone to sing and everything and to drown out the crying of kids. And anyways, when we got to about Dudney or Droch, one of the trainmen got out, and he had to walk in front of the train. The train was just crawling, and he walked in front of the train to check the tracks before we went over them. And it took us 4 hours on that train to get to Vancouver, and we were the last train. The tracks broke after that, and that was the last train to get through, and we got into Vancouver about, 11 o'clock at night. And I can remember, oh my God, I think it was like in a hall, or it may have even been in part. We were going to be taken to the old Vancouver Hotel, which the Wask family, who actually owned the Harrison Hotel at the time, they decided they gave that for the flood refugees. For as long as they wanted, because they were going to be demolishing it later. And everyone had to be inoculated right then. And, oh my God, that was just, kids were crying and screaming. And anyways, then from there, after we were inoculated, and, of course, these were Army doctors that, inoculated us, and we thought they were terrible. They were big and, scary. And so then they took us, gave us a room, and this hotel had 15 floors in it, and I'm not sure what floor we were on, but probably about the middle maybe, because I remember us going up on an elevator, and I thought this must be jail, because we had to get in this elevator, and it had those metal, like sliding doors, like metal cages, and a woman was sitting there operating the elevator, took us up to our room. I think there was 15 of us in the room. The first night, my aunt and her 3 girls, who were a year apart, and they were all in diapers because they were 1, 2, and 3, really young. And my aunt's sister-in-law, Jane Langcourt, and she had a couple of children. And we had a neighbor girl, Florence Hawklock, was with us. And I think there was another girl. It was so confused. Anyways, we figured there was about 15 of us. There were 7 of us because our older brothers had to stay in Agassiz, help with the dikes or the sandbagging. Then the next day, so we just were all on mattresses on the floor. And then the next day, they gave us the adjoining room. So my aunt and her sister-in-law moved there, so it gave us a bit more room. And then we were taken the next morning. We had to go downstairs to the lobby and line up, and they gave us meal tickets. And then from there, we were marched down Granville Street, right down to Davie Street, and which was called the White Lunch Cafe, and it was kind of like cafeteria style. I think you had to open little glass doors, like cupboard doors, and the food was in there, and you reached in and took it. And so we thought this was great. I mean, we had some pretty good stuff. I mean, at home we had a bowl of porridge for breakfast. Now we're getting stewed prunes and fruit and everything. So we thought that was kind of good. And so the whole cafeteria was pretty well all refugees. And we had to do that every meal. March down, same way. And, so then they, I guess, same day or whatever, we were then taken to a big hall, which I gather after was a Salvation Army hall, and we could pick out clothes for ourselves because the only clothes we had was what we were wearing. So, of course, we picked out all these clothes. Half them, didn't even fit properly because we weren't trying. We were just so anxious to get some clothes and shoes and everything. So my aunt recalls, she always says, "Oh, Pat, we used to get such a kick." In our room at the hotel, we would kind of put on a fashion show. So we'd model all the clothes that we had got for Auntie Weave and then the rest of them, their entertainment. And then we actually had this hotel having 15 floors for our fun, recreation. A lot of the kids that were our school chums, like in Agassiz, they were at the hotel, so they would get up on the 15th floor and ride the banisters right down to the basement. And so then they ended up giving us the basement, the whole basement part for our games room. So we'd play ball down there, play in any kind of game we could make up. And that was good. And we ended up having to go to school because we're talking of May, and I guess it was in May sometime it was flooded. I'm not sure exactly what day. Anyways, we had to go to school. So they had brought a couple of our teachers from Agassiz, and so we went, they took us by bus, we went to, which was called a Dawson School, and the Dawson School was on Burrard Street, and all the flood refugee kids would line up on one row, and this was mainly for the cafeteria, and then all the Dawson kids would be lined up on another row and start the fight. One Dawson kid would say, "Oh, you flood kids," and then there would be kicking and crying, and so lots of times, our teachers were pretty good. If we tell them we weren't feeling good, we wouldn't have to go. So, and they put on a lot of entertainment for us, the Red Cross, I guess, and people came and they would take us by bus or whatever to different places in Vancouver just to keep us entertained. Then one day, now this is something that could never happen today. One day, this family or this couple came to the hotel, and my aunt happened to be, they were out shopping, and my aunt, she wasn't really in charge of us. My sister Faye was, but she kind of oversaw. So they said they heard about the Cameron family, and they wanted to take a couple of the girls to look after for the rest of the summer. And so us girls were pretty tight, pretty thick. We didn't want to separate. So we said, well, we can't go because we have stuff to do to help look after everybody. So, but you could take our two brothers, and we had our two brothers that were younger, and so they took them. And that's all we knew was this family said this. So when my aunt came back, she asked, where Bill and Duncan were, and we said, well, this family came and wanted to take them. And she was just wild. So she went down and found out that this family were distantly connected with one of my mom's sister's family. So they kept them all summer, and every summer after that, they would have them come down and have a vacation with them. And they were great family. And then we were there until August. And then they said, yes, we can go home. We didn't have a lot of information about Mom and Dad or what was going on. And so it was still, we thought, what is, a real nightmare with you've never been out of Agassiz pretty well. So anyways, we were put on the train, and Dad's government truck picked us up from the train and took us home. And we must have, they cleaned the house up a bit, or best, but I can remember that the furniture and everything was pretty well damaged. So then later on, the Red Cross came in and they assessed everything, and they gave us new furniture and anything like that. I think our stove and stuff like that were fine because they had got them up on blocks. We had about, I would say, 15 inches of water in our house. So, and there was just sand everywhere. Sand all over the fields, just sand. And in the ditches, there was dead fish, because I remember our neighbor lady, Mrs. Hawkalock, she was a great cook, and she would say, well, hey, you bring them to me, and she cooked them up. But they were, they looked like they'd been spawning or something, So, anyways, that was pretty well our experience down in Vancouver. And like I say, it was we hadn't a clue as to what was going on in Agassiz.
No.
Except my brothers were jealous of the fact that when we told them that we had all this good food and everything, and, they were, my brother, I remember Donnie saying, we had a lot of pork and beans, and I goes, oh, gee.
I would assume that going to Vancouver and staying there about 3 months, that was probably the largest city you've ever been in.
Oh, we had never. I guess I guess I'd been to Chilliwack because we had to go to Chilliwack for our dental and everything. But I'd never been in Vancouver. And, and that hotel, I mean, they probably would have had to tear it down anyways, because I think we totaled it, I mean, they just said to us, that's your home, and do what just be comfortable. And we had some real funny times, too. The neighbor girl, that first night when we were up in the room, Florence she had never been to Vancouver, and she's looking out the window, and, you see all these lights and everything. So she panicked, and she opened the fire escape door and went down the stairs and told them that there was a fire. And because the neighboring building, their smokestack, I guess, whatever they were burning, their sparks came up. through the out of the chimney. And I can't remember. My aunt said it was like a factory or somebody there. So the next thing we knew, I remember my aunt saying, "Oh, my God, what is happening?" And the door burst open, and it was full of police and firemen came into our room, because they had to look and check and see what this girl had seen. And actually, I can remember us girls were under the covers giggling. You know, but because we realized it wasn't a fire, but, you know, they still had to come and check it out. But